Deontay Wilder is one of the biggest oddities in the world of boxing. See, usually the key to success for professional fighters is either outstanding skills or speed. But Deontay Wilder has none of that. Unlike most elite fighters, he doesn't have a world-class technique, he doesn't have world-class footwork, and he doesn't have world-class speed. In fact, most of it is far away from being world-class. His technique is raw, his footwork is basically non-existent, and his jabs look more like he is trying to swat away a bee than trying to hit his opponent. But when his right hand connected, it was almost a guaranteed knockout. This insane power gave him the nickname, the Bronze Bomber, and a lot of other professional fighters ended calling him a one-trick pony for just being able to pull out one move. And despite being a one-trick pony, just waiting to connect his right hand, he still managed to accomplish what most boxers only dream of, becoming the heavyweight champion of the world, with a record of 42 wins, with 41 of them being by knockout. However, Deontay Wilder becoming the heavyweight champion of the world is a story that was very unlikely. He was born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and most of his life it didn't look like he would be making it out of his home city. See, most boxers that have the ambition to become professional fighters usually start in their early teen years. However, Wilder had his first boxing lesson way later. The first time he put on his gloves was at the age of 21, and the reasons he had for that were also way different than the reasons other boxers usually have. In a podcast with Joe Rogan, he revealed that he only started boxing because he needed to make money to pay for surgeries for his daughter who was born with spina bifida. During the podcast, he said that he made a promise to his one-year-old daughter. He told her that he is going to become world champion so he could always provide for her. What's even crazier about this is that the only reason he chose boxing as a sport is because he doesn't need to go to college for that to become a professional, like with football or basketball. And in his own words, he saw this as his last opportunity to become a professional athlete. So in October 2005, he picked up the gloves for the first time, and the first time he went into the gym, he was immediately hooked. Now, a couple of weeks after he started training in the gym, he heard about the Olympic trials for the Olympic Games in Beijing in 2008, and he told his trainer that he just wanted to learn the fundamentals and then get into the ring so he can make it to these trials. Unlike other guys that train for at least a year or two to have their first amateur fight, he pretty much immediately jumped into amateur fights, where in his own word, he just kept knocking out people. At this time, he started making a name for himself as the guy with no technique, who hits insanely hard. In record time, he became a household name in the amateur league, which also already earned him some money for his daughter, but by far not enough to cover the treatments she needed. His first big breakthrough was when he won the Golden Gloves on May 6, 2007, just 1.5 years after he started to train boxing, and he also won the US Championships. At this tournament, he won against one of the most promising boxers, Isaiah Thomas, who many believed would be the next world champion, and David Thompson in the finals. This brought him on the map for the Olympic trials, and he made it to the team, so he would be going to the Olympics in Beijing in 2008. What's funny about this is that it surprised even the coaches, and Wilder said that they didn't even have his name on the list as the one that's going to be on the team. So in 2008, he represented the United States at the Olympics. And despite only boxing for 2.5 years at this point, and having no speed or technique, he managed to secure a bronze medal. This also earned him the nickname, the Bronze Bomber, because the people he was in the Olympic camp with couldn't believe how strong his punch really is. And this is really what set him apart. It could look like he is losing the entire fight, losing one round after another, but one of his punches is enough to knock out his opponent, which is also something we are going to see in his fights against Tyson Fury, but we are going to talk about that later in the video. Even Johnny Nelson, a former world champion, was impressed by Wilder's insane strength. Right after he returned to the United States, he started his professional career and quickly became one of the biggest hopes to bring the heavyweight title back to the United States for the first time since Shannon Briggs in 1998. However, at that point, many people doubted if his raw power could really make up for his lack of technique and speed. Their main argument was that amateur fighters and professionals are a totally different breed. In November 2008, the same year he fought in the Olympics, he gave his professional debut against Ethan Cox. He won the fight by TKO in the second round after knocking his opponent down 3 times, which was one of the most impressive debuts on the pro scene we have seen. And from this point on, his success story just went on. In 2009, he fought 7 times and knocked all of them out in the first round. In his first 20 professional fights, only one of his opponents managed to survive beyond the third round, and even he got knocked out in round number 4. And in the following years, this statistic became just more impressive. Out of 32 opponents, 18 of them were knocked out in the first round. As you can imagine, this put him on the map, and he got known as the one-punch wonder, who was able to end fights with a single shot. This ability to knock out opponents even without landing a very clean shot on them became his trademark. And at one point, it seemed like he could simply half-heartedly hit his opponents and they would fall down, like in the fight against Robert Helenius, where he knocked him out while moving backward, with a punch that wasn't even fully extended. But even at this point, the critics didn't stop doubting Wilder. They said that most of his knockouts came against opponents that weren't ranked in the WBC top 40. Therefore, many said that he was fighting against opponents that were simply not good enough to really tell if Wilder had what it takes to become a world champion. And just looking at the statistics of his opponents, they really have a point. Looking at just 2 examples, one of his fights was against Matthew Greer, who had a record of 15 wins and 8 losses. Or another one was against Jason Gavern, who had a record of 25 wins, 16 losses, and 4 draws. So you could clearly say that Wildy was not fighting the best of the best, but it seemed like he didn't care about all of these critics, and he continued to knock out people left and right, winning fights with only one punch. With so many wins under his belt, also his ring presence became incredibly intimidating for his opponents. Not because his technique got better. In fact, a lot of people argue that his technique and speed became worse as he won more and more fights, but because he had a psychological advantage over his opponents. And to be honest, who of us wouldn't be afraid to step into the ring with a guy who basically knocks out every opponent he touches? Now, with Wilder's winning streak growing, the anticipation for his shot at the heavyweight title got bigger and bigger. In the following fights, he began facing better opponents with better statistics. For example, in August 2013, he fought against Liakovic, who was a former WBO heavyweight champion who had a record of 25 wins and 5 losses. Wilder, as with his other enemies, he knocked him out in the first round with a big right hand, and Liakovic went down heavily and even began twitching, which ended the fight even without the referee starting to count. For his fans, this was an impressive win, but the critics quickly started to argue that Liakovic didn't fight for 2 years prior to that, and that Wilder hit him with an illegal blow. For the following years, he kept winning, and on January 15, 2017, Wilder finally became his chance for the title. As I already said, this was Wilder's first chance to become the first American heavyweight champion since 1998. His opponent became Bermane Stiverne, who was known for not being able to be knocked out easily. And unlike all of his other fights, Wilder didn't knock him out in the first round, and not in the second or third. In fact, this was Wilder's first fight that went over the full 12 rounds. And during this fight, you could really see that Wilder lacked the speed, durability, and technique fighters at this class usually have. However, despite being the worst boxer in skills, he still managed to win the fight by decision and became the first American heavyweight world champion after Shannon Briggs. And he also recognized this in his post-fight interview where he said, "I'm just happy to bring this belt back into America." Further, he said, "I want to bring excitement back to the heavyweight division," which was a direct attack at the Klitschko brothers, who many believe that they have been the most boring champions of all time with their jab and grab style. In the next 5 years, he would go on and defend his title 7 times against opponents like Eric Molina, Chris Arreola, and even Luis Ortiz, who is said to be one of his best challengers up until this point. What's even more impressive about this is the fact that he won all of this 7 title fights by either knockout, technical knockout, or the referee had to stop the fights because his opponents were too hurt to keep fighting, which counts as RTD. Through these insane title defenses, he silenced many of his critics, but at the same time, a ton of people that watched him fight really started to doubt if technique and skills is something that is really needed in boxing, at least to the extent many people told them they needed it. But was it really just his raw strength that made him so dangerous? Well, it's probably obvious to anyone by now that his technique is extremely poor in a lot of regards. For example, his footwork is probably the worst from any heavyweight champion we had so far. Or that his head movement is basically non-existent, walking into a lot of hits from his enemies. This could definitely be seen in the fight against Tyson Fury, which we are going to talk about later, or in his fight against Luis Ortiz. So this is definitely not what made him a feared opponent. The same can be said about his speed. He is never seen being as quick as others. However, when asked about these flaws, he simply said, "I only have to be perfect for 2 seconds, while my opponents have to be perfect for 12 rounds." which pretty much summarizes his entire boxing style. Instead of focusing on the areas he is lacking massively, he would spend entire fights waiting for the perfect moment to knock people out with only one punch. What makes this even more impressive is the fact that he was able to knock people out who were way bigger than him. See, while most other knockout artists weigh way more than 230 pounds, Wilder only weighed around 215 pounds in most of his fights. And this unbelievable power is what also made a lot of opponents fear him, because he is able to knock them out cold in pretty much any situation. For example, in his fight against Artur Szpilka, he ended the fight with a single right hand, and Szpilka fell on the ground and was motionless for quite a while. This is what scared a lot of people, as Artur was basically having a perfect defense the entire fight, and Wilder still managed to knock him out in round number 9. This unpredictability is what his opponents feared the most, as they have realized that they could simply not rely on their standard defense techniques. And this fact added a whole other layer to Wilder's strategy, which is fear. See, opponents that stepped into the ring with him knew that they could be knocked out at any second of the fight and through any angle. Now, if you are wondering what big of a factor this psychological component has, let's take a look what Fury says about this. In an interview, he said that boxing is 90% mental and 10% physical. So having a psychological edge over your opponent is going to help you win those fights. And this can also be seen in one of his most impressive fights against Luis Ortiz. During the fight, Wilder was pretty much outboxed the entire fight, but in the 10th round, he landed a fight-ending punch that knocked out Ortiz to the point where he couldn't move anymore and looked like he was searching a remote. And this combination of raw power and unpredictability made Wilder so extremely dangerous and made him win pretty much every single fight, with most of them through knockout, until he fought against Tyson Fury. See, while Wilder was knocking people out, he was yet to meet someone that was the exact opposite of him. While Wilder made his name through his insane power, Fury is known for having insane speed, unpredictability in his movement, and one of the best fighting IQ of modern-day boxing. However, Fury stopped boxing years ago after winning the world title against Klitschko and then falling into a deep depression. What made Fury come back is the fact that Wilder disrespected him and that he claimed that he would knock Tyson Fury out like everyone else. It didn't take long after this, and Tyson Fury announced that he would return and wants to fight against Wilder. The promoters arranged the fight, and the event would become known as the Clash of Titans. At that time, Tyson hadn't fought in years, and he was massively out of shape. So walking into their first fight in December 2018, he still looked all chubby, and with every punch, his body was wiggling. In the lead up to the fight, they exchanged a lot of trash talk, with Wilder dismissing Fury's abilities, saying that he knocked out people like him before, and Fury saying that Wilder has no technique, and promising that he is going to expose the flaws of Wilder. When the fight started, it was going as expected, and how most Wilder fights went. He was pretty much outboxed by Fury for 11 rounds. However, in the 12th round, there happened something that would become boxing history. With Wilder knocking down Fury with his right hand, Fury was laying on the ground for 7 or 8 seconds and everyone thought he got knocked out. However, just before the time was up, it looked like Fury's soul returned to his body. He woke up and started boxing again. What made this so impressive is the fact that Fury kept boxing as nothing happened. The fight ended in a controversial split draw, with many believing Fury had done enough to win despite the knockdown. You could clearly see that Wilder wasn't happy about this, but it didn't seem to be enough to break his confidence, so they both trained like animals for the rematch in February in 2020. But this time, it should be a different story. Fury trained with a way more aggressive approach, and like he promised, he quickly showed that Wilder's style can be beaten with the right technique. And this is exactly what happened. In round 7, Wilder was not only outboxed, he also was so hurt by Fury's punches that his team had to throw the towel, which led to the first loss in his career. After that, you could clearly see that Wilder's confidence was hurt, but for their third match, it seemed like he wanted to make a comeback. In the third fight, in October 2021, they really had a war in the ring, with both of them hitting the canvas multiple times. However, this time again, Fury ended the fight. Their trilogy and pretty much Wilder's era of being seen as the knockout wonder. Fury's ability to avoid Wilder's big shots while landing his own have once again shown how important technique and boxing IQ is. While Wilder struggled to adjust his game plan, Fury evolved with each fight, becoming more aggressive and even adopting some of Wilder's power-punching tactics. But despite the losses up until this point, Wilder remains one of the biggest oddities in modern boxing, showing that raw power and the ability to hit a hard punch at the right time can really get you to the world title of boxing.